What is state? Well, it's just an object that lives inside your component. We're not going to look at hooks right now, so we'll just be focusing on state objects that live inside the class component. Why not just use props for everything? So if we look at this one, we are used to using props, and this is just a deconstructed prop right here that we've already covered. Well, first of all, props are read-only, so modifying a prop is kind of a pain. You can change the prop value from a child component by also passing a callback function from the parent to the child, but like I said, it's just not fun. State deals with the data that's maintained by that specific component. You don't want to pass data from the parent component when the child component is the only component that needs to deal with that data. So let's look at state in this tutorial. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new component, and we're going to call that getting rid of stress.js. Alright, now that we have our component, we'll import React and component from React. And this is going to have to be a class-based component, getting rid of stress, extends component. That's going to require one lifecycle method, which is render. And that render is going to return a React element, which is going to be a div tag. Alright, so far, pretty much exactly the same thing, right? Export default, getting rid of stress. Alright. Whereas before we pass props, this time we're going to do everything with state. But before we do that, let's just do a test. Let's go back to our app.js, make sure we didn't just mess up on anything. We're going to comment that out. We're going to delete, delete the whole thing out. And we're going to import getting rid of stress from components, getting rid of stress. Then we're going to render that component, getting rid of stress. We're going to save that, and sure enough, when we refresh the page, test is right there. Okay, so now let's go back into our getting rid of stress class-based component. Like I said, state is an object, and to initialize that object, it can be done in one of two ways. So the first way is inside the constructor. This constructor is also going to receive the props object, so we're just going to pass that up to the inherited constructor, right? So which is located inside the component. All right, so now that that's done, we can go ahead and initialize our state. And for this one, we're just going to create an object, which is just indicated with these curly braces. And one of the ways that I like to get rid of stress is with the book. Don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff by Richard Carlson. So that's my favorite way. All right, yoga, that's another way that I don't get rid of stress. Just thinking about that makes me stressed out. All right, so no yoga. Gym, sure. Yes to the gym. Yes, gym. Alright, so that's much better. And then daydreaming. So daydream. What are we going to be daydreaming about? Of course, about cars. Alright, so now we have our state object. So now we can access that state object. How do we access the state object inside our render method? Very similar to what we did with props. So we're going to have curly braces, and we're going to say instead of this dot props, we're going to say this dot state, and then the key, basically the property inside there. So this dot state dot book. Okay, we're going to copy this down a few times, and we're going to say no yoga. We're going to say yoga right there because that's what we named it. Yes, gym. gym right there. And daydream. We're going to see what the output of this dot state dot daydream is. Okay, so let's go back. Failed to compile. State is not defined. Why is it not defined? I think I know. I almost forgot. We have to use this dot state because we're calling this in the constructor method. So inside our constructor method, we have to specify this dot state and then everything else. Because like I said, the state object is already defined inside component, so we're just calling this dot state to update it, right? So that's basically all there really is to state inside the constructor. We don't have to list this in the constructor anymore, and we can actually delete this whole constructor and specify the state right inside our class component. At that point, you would specify it as state. So that's where I was just kind of losing it a little bit. So we're just basically overriding it. State is equal to the object, whereas in the constructor we have to specify, okay, this exists up there somewhere, this dot state. So those are your two different ways to store state inside the class-based component. I'm actually going to bring that back. I'll copy this. I'll comment that code out, and then I'll list this at the bottom so that you guys have a reference for both.